Reading 17 from the Psychological Commentaries on the Teaching of Gurdjieff and Ouspensky by Dr. Maurice Nicoll, Volume 2. Commentary, Berlin, April 30th, 1944. The Enneagram. 13. The inner circulation of the Enneagram. At every moment, a person on this earth is under one or other of the 48 orders of laws or influences that play upon this planet owing to its position in the ray of creation. The influences come from higher, middle, and lower parts of the descending octave of the ray in which our earth appears. These 48 orders of laws from different levels in the scale of things govern the earth and all the earths in the myriads of solar systems in the Milky Way to which our solar system belongs. Recollect also that there are myriads of Milky Ways or galaxies in the universe. We are therefore very small, practically insignificant. If our Earth were shattered by a comet, it would be of no importance to the total sway of all the vastness of created things in the universe. Shattered planets in our minute solar system exist which revolve round the sun as small bodies. Planets only a few miles in diameter, hundreds of them. This is looking at the visible, physical side of things known to science concerning the external universe, and is either marvelous or is weakening to self-feelings. But when we look at the whole matter according to esoteric psychology, the picture becomes transformed. The work teaches that a human being is not merely a function of the world, he is born in or a slave to it. The apparatus of the universe is, so far as our ray of creation is concerned, for the purpose of evolution. It is a vast distilling machine to extract the finer from the coarser. This is an old image, wonderfully described, for example, in the teachings of Mani. What is individual evolution in the esoteric sense? Seeing by long inner work, and then choosing the finer, and eventually willing and ultimately living the finer. Do you recall the ancient Smagdarine tablet of Hermes, which begins with saying that you must separate the finer from the coarser? This begins personal work. It takes a long time before it begins. What is meant by finer? If you have a moment of fuller understanding, of insight, or of outer perception by means of hydrogen 24, it will be finer than anything that can be achieved by the intelligence due to hydrogen 48. You see hundreds of connections that you never saw before. In exactly the same sense, a cooked potato is finer than a raw one. It is a higher hydrogen and becomes food for man and can enter into him. Instead of being eaten by cattle, it can be eaten by man. But cattle cannot cook potatoes. The intelligence of man is necessary to make fire, to make a vessel holding water, and so on. A raw potato is classed in the table of hydrogens as belonging to the order of hydrogens designated by the number 1536. This hydrogen comes low down in the scale of being, derived from the ray of creation. A cooked potato is capable of another destiny, just as we ourselves are, if we shift our level of being, even a fraction. The being of a cooked potato attracts a different life from the being of a raw potato. How does it ascend in the scale of being? By means of something acting on it, something higher. The whole business of cooking things is the action of something higher on something lower. But notice that the result does not reach the level of what is acting on it. The intelligence of man, applied in the form of heat and water and vessels and so on to the raw potato, does not mean that the result, the cooked potato, knows how to cook other potatoes. A higher force acting on a lower force, or a higher matter acting on a lower matter, brings the lower up to a stage beyond what it was, but not up to the level of the acting force. This idea is represented in the work in terms of the three forces. An active force acting upon a passive force produces an intermediate force. When food is taken into the body, it enters according to the teaching of the work, as material conducting a passive force. It is then acted upon by an active force present in the body, and the result is an intermediate force. Thus, 768 is acted on by 192, and the result is 384, which is intermediate. Any matter conducting passive force is transformed into a higher state by means of a matter conducting active force, provided there is an intermediate possibility. But the higher matter into which it is transformed is neither one nor the other, but a third thing, intermediate between them, conducting neutralizing force, as long as it remains within the sphere of influences of the forces that gave it origin. Thus, diagram. Or if we arrange these figures in ascending order of fineness, if 192 is not present, 768 cannot reach its next stage of evolution into 384. Nor can 192, by acting on 768, expect to get anything equal to itself. It can only create something in between itself and what it is acting on. So the higher, acting on the lower, can only transform the lower to a stage beyond what it was, but not up to the level of the higher. And the lower cannot reach its next stage, save by the influence of something higher than both. This idea is very deep and explains not only many things in life, but also many special things, as in the chemistry of the body. It also explains, in one sense only, what esotericism is. Esoteric ideas, and the fire and light behind them, which a man can feel when he gives them real valuation, can be regarded in this connection, and only in this connection, as active force. Acting on man, taking man as a hydrogen whose center of gravity lies in 48, these influences coming from a higher point in the sun octave can transform or cook him up to the level 24. But actually esoteric ideas are first to be taken as 12. That is, higher than the product or result. For when carbon 12 acts on incoming life, taken as 48, it can only give origin to 24. Let us now take the right-hand area of the Enneagram, which is marked with the numbers 384, 192, and 96, in progressive series on the periphery. Many other things can be arranged round the circumference apart from the hydrogens, but it will be easiest to discuss the reverse movement in terms of hydrogens. Notice that in the inner lines, 384 is connected with 96, and then with 192. Something goes forward and then back in a reverse motion. The inner line between 384 and 96 indicates some action, some connection between these 2 points as a first movement. Another line then goes to the station 192 as a second direction. The order of these inner connections is different from the order of the outer series on the circumference, namely 384, 192, and 96. That is, the inner circulation in the Enneagram takes a different form from the outer. We think naturally that 384 should become 192 and then 96 in a regular manner. But internally, behind outer appearances, another system is at work, which is very strange if you reflect on it. You are probably looking at the mystery of life in the inner circulation of the Enneagram, whereas looking at the outer series of numbers, you are perhaps looking at what corresponds to that powerful but erroneous form of thinking called thinking from appearances, from the senses. You notice that the higher must exist before the lower can undergo transformation. This is not difficult to grasp once the ray of creation, in its naked meaning, is emotionally perceived and privately acknowledged, for in it the higher forms the lower, so that if the lower seeks transformation, the higher is there awaiting it. This is one reason why it is a good thing to ponder the ray often in one's inner thoughts. The ray is a series of transformations of the finer into the coarser, from the highest to the lowest. What is the Enneagram about? The Enneagram depicts a series of transformations from lower to higher, from coarser to finer. Now, in order that a lower may become transformed into a higher, it must be passive. That is, it must allow itself to be acted upon by higher influences. How else could lower become higher? How else could the food we eat become cooked and recooked, transformed and retransformed into higher and higher substances, unless it is submitted to the 6 stages of digestion? Digestion is transformation. Work is transformation. And if the higher influences of the work are to act on a man, he must, in one sense, become passive to them and permit them to act. He can realize he cannot do, but he must realize also that greater mind exists. Otherwise, he will be in confusion. If he does not admit that anything bigger than he is in existence, or if in some way he thinks he made himself, he cannot be acted upon, and so cannot evolve. But if he does become passive, that is, capable of hearing, and then of accepting, he must not expect to get beyond his own next stage to begin with. He cannot equal the work. It would be a mistake to think so. He cannot equal the forces that are transforming him. If you reflect, you will see there must always be something higher than any man, whatever his stage, if evolution is possible. And so there must be a highest that is unattainable.